Hi everyone, welcome back to TechCravers. The year is 2026 and here I am making another Steam Deck emulation tutorial. Now, I don't know if you've been keeping up with the ongoing Steam Deck circus lately, but Valve recently decided to do a little bit of price reshuffling. These days, the cheapest Steam Deck will set you back around $789, while the higher end model is pushing $949. And that's quite a jump from the original $399 entry price that many of us paid when the Steam Deck first launched a few years ago. So before we continue, I'd just like to take a moment to thank AI for these absolutely reasonable Steam Deck prices with this small tribute. Yeah, sadly these price hikes are, at least in part, the cost of keeping the world's AI troubadour cats employed. But hey, if we're spending that kind of money on these things, we might as well make sure we're getting every last bit of value out of them. So today we're going to turn our Steam Decks into the ultimate portable emulation machines once again. I'll walk you through the fastest and easiest ways to get everything up and running, from installing the necessary emulators to organizing the game library and getting your favorite retro titles ready to play. Whether this is the first time you're setting up emulation on a Steam Deck or you're coming back to do it all over again, I've got you covered. So sit back, relax, and let's get started. Alright, I'm going to do this on my completely factory reset Steam Deck. In fact, this is the very first time I'm powering it on. You can follow everything I'm about to do using only the Steam Deck's built-in controls, but I highly recommend connecting a mouse and keyboard via Bluetooth to make the entire process a lot smoother and more convenient. Other than that, all you need is a USB drive or, like me, an external hard drive containing your games, aka ROMs, and your BIOS files. And in case it wasn't already obvious, you'll need to provide your own ROMs and BIOS files. BIOS files are required for a handful of emulators, but we'll get into that a little later in this guide. Once you're ready to get started, press the physical Steam button on your Steam Deck or click Steam in the bottom left corner of the screen. From there, scroll down to Power and select Switch to Desktop from the menu that appears. Once you're in desktop mode, the first thing you should do is set up a password, and optionally a username for your Steam Deck. Click the SteamOS icon in the bottom left corner and then select SteamOS User at the top of the menu. Choose a username, enter a password, and then click Apply. Some settings and administrative tasks you'll come across later may require you to enter a password, and this is the password they'll be referring to. Once you've set up your username and password, you can close that window. Next, it's time to launch a web browser. If this is the first time you're in desktop mode, you'll need to install one first. I usually stick with Mozilla Firefox, which is the default browser for SteamOS, but even that needs to be installed before you can use it. Simply click the small orange Firefox icon and when prompted, select Install from FlatHub in the upper right corner. The installation process may take a while, so be patient. And once it's finished, click the Firefox icon again to launch your browser. Type emudeck.com into the address bar and wait for the website to load. EmuDeck has evolved quite a bit since the last time we covered it on the channel, and in my opinion it remains the most reliable and user-friendly way to install and manage emulators on your Steam Deck. It takes what would otherwise be a fairly tedious setup process and turns it into something that's largely automated, making it perfect for both newcomers and experienced users alike. Click Download in the top right corner of the website and locate the SteamOS version of EmuDeck, which is the one we're looking for. The download should only take a few seconds, and once it's finished, you can go ahead and close your browser. Next, open the Downloads folder on your Steam Deck, which should be located under Home and Downloads, and find the EmuDeck installer you just downloaded. Then simply drag the file onto your Steam Deck desktop to make it easier to access during the installation process. Double-click the EmuDeck icon on your desktop and select Continue when the pop-up window appears. This will launch the EmuDeck installer. The installer will now begin downloading the files it needs, so give it a moment to complete the process. And one quick reminder, make sure your Steam Deck is connected to the internet throughout the rest of this setup, as EmuDeck will need to download additional components and updates along the way. When prompted to choose between easy mode and custom mode, go ahead and select custom mode. Don't worry, this doesn't make the setup any more complicated, it simply gives you a few extra options and a bit more control over the installation process, while still keeping everything straightforward and beginner friendly. On the next screen you'll be asked where you'd like to store your games, or more specifically your ROMs. If you have a microSD card installed, you can choose that as your storage location. I don't currently have one inserted, which is why mine shows error detecting SD card. You can also select custom directory if you prefer to manually choose where your ROMs will be stored, whether that's somewhere on your Steam Deck's internal storage or an external SSD or another drive altogether. Personally, I stick with the internal storage and let EmuDeck create all the necessary folders in their default location. It's the simplest option and the one I'd recommend for most users, at least if you have the empty storage required. Next, you'll be asked to choose which device you're installing EmuDeck on. You'll want to select Steam Deck unless you're one of the approximately 16 people on the planet still rocking an Anbernic Win600 that somehow survived this long and remains fully operational. After that, you'll be asked how much control you want over how the games are presented in your library. You can either have games show up as individual titles in Steam, complete with artwork and metadata, or you can launch everything from a single front-end application. In this case, that front-end is Emulation Station, which acts as a central hub for all your emulated games. The choice is entirely up to you, but I usually go with highest here. That gives me the flexibility to add my favorite games directly to Steam as standalone titles while still having access to Emulation Station as an all-in-one launcher for everything else. The next screen lets you choose which emulators you'd like to install. Personally, I only install the ones I know I actually be using, but if you're not sure yet, there's nothing wrong with selecting all of them. Emulators generally don't take up much storage space, so there's very little downside. On the following screen, you'll be asked which of those emulators you'd like EmuDeck to automatically configure and optimize for the Steam Deck. My recommendation here is simple: select every emulator you chose on the previous page. EmuDeck does a great job of applying Steam Deck specific settings, saving you the hassle of tweaking everything manually later on. The next screen lets you decide whether you like the listed emulators to automatically create save states, allowing you to resume your games exactly where you left off each time you launch them. This one comes down to personal preference, so choose whichever option sounds best to you and move on. The screen after that gives you the option to set up and sign into your Retro Achievements account, if you have one. Retro Achievements add achievement support to classic retro games, giving you extra challenges and another reason to revisit old favorites. If you don't already have an account, you can create one for free and sign in before continuing. For the purpose of this guide though, I'm going to skip this step. And the next few screens are all about personal preference and how you'd like your retro games to look and behave. Everything here is pretty self-explanatory, and in most cases you can simply toggle the available options to see what changes. Take a moment to go through each screen and choose the setting that appeals to you. Once you're done, continue through the setup until you reach the screen titled "This is what EmuDeck will do." Review the summary to make sure you're happy with everything before proceeding. And once you click finish, Sonic will appear and start running at speeds only Sonic is capable of, while EmuDeck gets to work installing everything you have selected. Depending on your setup and where you have chosen to install everything, this process can take anywhere from a couple of minutes to quite a while, so don't worry if it seems to be taking its time. Just let your Steam Deck do its thing, grab a drink and come back in a few minutes once the installation has finished. Now, while Sonic was busy breaking the sound barrier, I took the opportunity to organize my external hard drive. On mine, I have created one folder for my BIOS files and another folder for my games, or ROMs. Remember that you can also do this with a regular thumb drive or USB stick. Once you reach the installation complete screen in EmuDeck, click Next in the bottom corner. On the following screen, select Manual Copy to manually transfer your games. Then click Open Emulation Folder. This will open the emulation folder that EmuDeck has just created on your Steam Deck. In my case, it's located in the Home directory on my internal storage. If you chose to install EmuDeck on a micro SD card, you'll find the folder there instead. The emulation folder contains the folder structure that make the rest of this process significantly easier. Inside it you'll find a folder called BIOS. This is where you'll drag and drop any BIOS files that you have. Some platforms, such as the original PlayStation and PlayStation 2, require BIOS files in order to function properly. A few others can have BIOS files to provide a more authentic experience, such as displaying the original startup sequence, like the classic Game Boy Advance boot screen. That said, most systems don't require BIOS files at all, so don't be surprised if any of these folders remain empty. The other important folder inside Emulation is the ROMs folder. Inside it you'll find a large collection of folders named after various console abbreviations. These are the folders you'll populate with your games. For example, GameCube games go into the GC folder, Game Boy Advance games go into the GBA folder, and so on. If you're ever unsure where a particular game belongs, simply open the TXT file included in each folder. It will tell you exactly which system the folder is intended for, as well as which file formats are supported. And with that done, connect your USB drive or external hard drive and select Mount and Open from the menu that appears. From here on out, it's mostly a matter of dragging and dropping files into the correct locations. The easiest way to do this is to keep your USB drive or external hard drive open in a window on the side of the screen and your EmuDeck ROMs folder open on the other side. From there, it's simply a matter of dragging your games from the drive into their corresponding folders. It's quick, straightforward, and makes it easy to keep track of what you have already transferred and what still needs to be copied over. I usually start by copying all of my games over to the appropriate folders inside the ROMs directory, and once that is done, I make sure all the necessary BIOS files are in place for any systems, or more accurately, any emulators that require them. Depending on how many games you're planning to transfer, this can take anywhere from a few seconds or minutes to well over an hour if you're moving large libraries such as PlayStation 2 or Wii U collections. It's a good idea to keep your Steam Deck connected to a charger during this process, and you may even want to temporarily disable any power saving or sleep settings to prevent the transfer from being interrupted. That said, if you're using an OLED Steam Deck, try not to leave the screen on unnecessarily for extended periods. While modern OLED panels are much better than they used to be, minimizing static screen time is still a good habit if you want to reduce the risk of image retention or burn-in over the long term. And just like you did with the games, copy your BIOS files from your external drive into the BIOS folder inside the emulation directory created by EmuDeck. If you don't have any BIOS files, you can easily find guides online explaining how to obtain them. Just keep in mind that BIOS files are often copyrighted material, so the best approach is usually to create backups from hardware you legally own. There are plenty of excellent tutorials on YouTube that walk you through that process for various systems if you need a hand getting started. For this guide, I'm copying over BIOS files for the original PlayStation and the various Game Boy systems. I'm intentionally holding off on the PlayStation 2 BIOS files for now though, because there's something I want to show you a little later on. Once you've finished copying over your games and BIOS files, you can close all of those folders and return to the EmuDeck window that has been patiently waiting in the background. From there, simply click Next to continue with the setup process. On the next screen, click Launch Steam ROM Manager just to get past this step, and when the confirmation pop-up appears, click Yes. Once Steam ROM Manager opens, go ahead and close it right away, we'll come back to it later. After that, return to the EmuDeck window and click Finish to complete the installation. At this point, we're done with the basics. We have installed the emulators we want, configured them for the Steam Deck, and transferred our games and BIOS files. Speaking of BIOS files, if you look in the menu on the left-hand side of EmuDeck, you'll find a tool called BIOS Checker. Go ahead and click on it. This is a handy utility that shows you which BIOS files are required for different systems and whether EmuDeck can find them. As you can see, PlayStation 1 is marked in green because we copied that BIOS file over earlier. PlayStation 2 on the other hand is marked in red because we deliberately skipped it. The only reason I left it out was so I could show you this tool in action. So before we move on with anything else, I'm going to copy the PlayStation 2 BIOS file into the correct folder so you can see how BIOS Checker updates once everything is in place. The next time you open BIOS Checker, it should have updated and turned green, assuming that you have placed a correct BIOS file in the correct folder. It's a really useful tool for troubleshooting since it immediately lets you know whether EmuDeck can detect the files it needs. So if a particular system isn't working as expected, BIOS Checker is often one of the first places worth looking. Now, before we start managing our games, there's one more important step we need to take. In the menu on the left, click Manage Emulators and then scroll all the way down and select Steam ROM Manager. Once you're there, click on Reset Configuration on the right-hand side. This only takes a second, but it's worth doing. If you skip this step, Steam ROM Manager may have trouble detecting your Steam account later on, which can cause issues when importing your games into Steam. Once that's done, open Steam ROM Manager from the menu on the left. When prompted, click on Choose, select your Steam account from the pop-up window, and then click on Save. And then click Next to proceed to the Parsers screen. By selecting an individual parser, you can now choose whether games from that system should be added to your Steam library or not. This can be useful if you only want certain systems to appear in Steam, but for most people there's no need to spend much time here. Instead, click Add Games, and then click on Parse. Steam ROM Manager will now scan for all the folders inside the ROMs directory that we populated earlier. It will automatically identify your games, download artwork and metadata for them, and prepare everything for import into your Steam library. Once the scan is complete, you can browse through the result and even switch between different cover art options if you'd like. Personally, I usually stick with the default selections. You can also click Exclude Games if there are specific games or emulators that you don't want appearing in your Steam library. I generally hide all of the emulators themselves, since I prefer seeing only my games when browsing Steam. Once you have hidden everything you want to hide, click on Save Excludes. When you're happy with your selection of games and emulators you want to keep visible, click Save to Steam. Steam ROM Manager will then work its magic, creating all the necessary entries and adding them directly to your Steam library. Depending on how many games you have imported, this may take a few moments, so give it some time to finish. Once it's done, your games will be ready and waiting for you inside Steam, complete with artwork, metadata, and everything else needed to make them feel right at home alongside the rest of your library. To test everything, go ahead and close any open windows, then double-click Return to Gaming Mode on your Steam Deck desktop. Back in Gaming Mode, all you need to do is open the Steam menu and head over to your library. Under the Collections tab, you'll find categories for all the retro systems you have added games for through your ROMs folders, assuming that you have followed all steps in this guide and everything has been set up correctly. From there, simply open the collection for the system you want to play, pick a game and launch it just like any other title in your Steam library. Now, if you ever decide to add more games or even entirely new systems in the future, you really only need to repeat the final steps from this guide. As a quick recap, grab your ROMs and any BIOS files required for the systems you want to add. Copy them into the respective ROMs and BIOS folders inside the Emulation directory on your Steam Deck. Next, open EmuDeck by double-clicking the EmuDeck icon on your desktop, then launch Steam ROM Manager from the menu on the left. Click Add Games, then Parse to scan for your newly added content. Once the scan is complete, click Save to Steam. Finally, return to gaming mode and that's it. Your new games and systems should now be available in your Steam library, all ready to play. Now, hopefully this updated guide has helped kickstart your journey toward building the ultimate portable emulation machine. If you have any questions at all, feel free to leave them in the comment section down below and I'll do my best to help out. And if you simply like to share your setup, leave some feedback or say something nice, that's always appreciated as well. If you found this guide helpful, or if you just enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a thumbs up. It really helps to support the channel and lets me know you'd like to see more content like this in the future. And with that said, thank you all so much for watching and hopefully I'll see you again in the next one.